We are not human beings having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. Pierre Teilhard de Chardin said that. He was a French Jesuit philosopher, and he is right. However, many people these days are acting like the former. They're acting like we are just humans and we're here for a limited time, so we must prolong life as long as possible on this earth because there is not anything else. However, as some of you know, that is not the case. We are eternal spiritual beings in this human experience, and we should act like it. Let's learn how to do that. Let's get started. All right, welcome back to Church Public. My name is Matt. I am so glad to be with you today. There's so much going on in the world, and I just want to talk about it. I want to help you process it. I want to help you understand how to connect faith to culture, how to live in this world but not be of this world, how to survive and thrive as we seek after Jesus and impact the community and maybe even the world around us. So thank you for joining me on this journey. If you haven't already, you can check out ChurchPublic.com. You can subscribe at iTunes, Apple, Spotify, any of the other places. You can watch on YouTube. You have to search Church Public as one word on YouTube to find the videos there. I am again working on that. And if you want to support, you can go to churchpublic.com/support. Any amount helps. We are trying to do this and bring you more and more content so that you can engage with the public square and help others learn about Jesus and follow him more and more as you do so. So today we are talking about the human experience, or rather the spiritual experience that we have as humans. And there is a big difference when you consider the two different ways. A lot of people these days are acting as if this is just a human experience with some weird spiritual connotations. That is the spiritual but not religious view. They don't believe, people believe that there is more, but the more is weird. I even ran across a couple of people who think that we're in some kind of computer simulation like the Matrix. Yes, there are people who really believe that. So if you are, I'm sorry, and I hope it goes well for you. Unfortunately, I don't believe that is the case. I believe there is more to this life, that there is a spiritual reality that we are living and working through, and that spiritual reality comes to bear in this world. And the way that we act, the way that we view God, the way that we treat one another has a big impact on the world around us. And we need to recognize that, and we need to live as if that were true, because it is. Sadly, like I said, many people do not act that way, and they act in really weird ways. So here's one of those weird ways today. Scientists from US and China have created embryos that are part human and part monkey. I know, I don't even know where to go from there, but it's true. It feels like weird Planet of the Apes things where, is this real? Is this a real thing that's going on? Yes, it is a real thing that's going on. And the embryos will be used to harvest organs. So the idea is they grow these weird monkey men and then kill them in order to give you an organ that you need in your body. Well, not you, because of course it's going to cost so much money that you can't afford it and I can't afford it. So the rich people will have organs that they can then harvest and live indefinitely, or really not, because it's just going to prolong their life for a little bit. So ultimately they're creating these, I don't know what to call them, creatures. Abomination feels a little bit strong, but that's what I'm feeling. They're creating these things, and the whole goal is to harvest these cloned organs from the monkey human hybrids to give you a little bit of extra life on this earth. This is the goal of science. So yay, science, I guess. I know we talk about feelings and fact, and so this feels wrong, but in fact it is wrong. And so that's where you get into this place where, we want to follow the science. I believe in science. I believe in the scientific method. I believe in putting forward hypotheses and then figuring out if they're true or not, and then finding out what is right from that. This is one of those, like, hey, this is the Malcolm, Dr. Malcolm from Jurassic Park, where he said, hey, you spent so much time trying to figure out if you could, you forgot to think about whether you should. And then, of course, we see what happens in Jurassic Park. But this is an actual, I know it's a funny movie, but this is an actual real life example of what is going on in science and people's minds and people's worlds, where they're building human clones, but they're not real human clones. So there's all these ethical problems there. But beyond the ethical problems, like of just doing this thing, like it's grotesque to create something just to harvest it. The goal of science in this case is to create life, just to kill it and harvest it so you can live a little bit longer on Earth. And NPR reports some scientists, quote, raise concerns the experiment may be unethical. That just feels like such a funny understatement to me. Kristen Matthews, fellow for science and technology at Rice University's Baker Institute, said, quote, I think the public is going to be concerned, and I am as well, that we're just kind of pushing forward with the science without having a proper conversation about what we should or should not do. Did that sound a little bit like Dr. Malcolm from Jurassic Park? Yeah, I think it did. And yet, that's the one side. I would be on that side. Probably not for the same reason as this person, but we'll talk about the ethical concerns in a second, because there is another side, and there's a big proponent of scientists who are pushing this forward. Because again, if you think that the human experience is the only thing and all there is and the whole goal, then you have to prolong this human life as long as possible, because that's all you get. We've seen that throughout this pandemic. People are trying to live as long as possible, trying to be safe as long as possible. And the whole goal of life is not to be safe, it is to live. And once you realize that this life is not the only life, and that there in fact is a life beyond and a life to come, then you realize that the goal of this life is not to live in this life forever. The goal of this life is to live the best you can now so that you live forever with God. It sounds kind of the same, but not the same at all in application. So, bioethicist Ensu Young at Case Western Reserve University, which I believe is at Harvard, says, quote, I don't see this type of research as being problematic. It's aimed at lofty humanitarian goals, end quote. And there you have it. I mean, that's what it is. So the goal of this research is humanitarian goals. Thereby, if it is humanitarian, it can't be bad, because if we're having the goal of humans, then that's the highest goal, right? And it almost sounds right. It's another one of those lie that's just a little bit off center, where it's almost believable and you're like, yeah, I mean, humans are important. And in fact, humans are important. Humans are made in the image of God. Humans are created by God to do good works, and humans are important. And even back to the garden, God created humans for a reason. And it sounds almost right, but unfortunately it leads you into this other very not Christian religion. And I do say religion specifically. This is a humanistic religion, a scientific religion. It's not about the method of science, where you put forward a hypothesis and decide with scientific data if it's right or not. This is into the realm of, if you don't agree with me, you're evil or wrong. And that's not science. That is much closer to religion. And the idea that humanity is set apart from the rest of creation, as we read about in Genesis, is the right thing. Humans are set above the rest of creation, and set in charge of the rest of creation, which leads to a whole bunch of humanitarian concerns, but not humanitarian in the way they define humanitarian. It's that humans should be the primary focus, but not at the expense of all the other things. That's the thing. And then when you start creating, and again, humans, even from the garden right after the fall, we moved into this place where we live, we're born and we live and we die. That is the natural order of life. And it's the life that we have, and the life that we're really supposed to live until we're then resurrected and are in the presence of God forever, if you follow after Jesus. The idea that you create life from multiple species, including humans and apparently some kind of monkeys, solely for the purpose of sacrificing them, harvesting their organs so that another human can live, now you're in the territory of weird sacrificial system that is definitely not how God intended it, and is some other weird religion that is just plain evil. That's just not good. To create life simply to sacrifice life is nowhere in biblical values or foundation or Christian living. That is, in fact, the opposite, because it's the essence of playing God. It's saying, God, you have a natural order, and we see it in creation, and we live in it, and we live and we die, and then have an afterlife. That's God's world. This new world they're trying to create is, no, I want to live forever, and I'm going to be the means that I live forever. Thereby, I am eliminating God and becoming God. So that is not a biblical value. We can't appreciate, we can't endorse this kind of idea. And don't hear me wrong, I'm not against medicine and I'm not against doctors. All those things are important, but there are limits, and there are limits when those go beyond the biblical foundations of, can you use medicine to help you live longer, or do you have to invent or play God to try to help you live forever? Big difference in between those two similar sounding statements. Breeding people or weird monkey people or whatever this is to steal their organs, it's just a terrible evil, and it is the opposite of compassion. Because you hear in this humanitarian view that, well, it's humanitarian and therefore it's kind and therefore it's compassionate, and it's just the opposite. It's the opposite of compassion. It's the most selfish act possible. It's literally all about you. It's all about you wanting to live forever and not caring if other people or things die in the interest of you living forever. That's the ultimate selfishness. That's not compassionate. So that it's just a terrible monkey people thing. And it sounds more and more every day like I'm talking science fiction things, and yet I'm not. This is just how the world is working right now, and it's a crazy, crazy world, isn't it? So let's move on. That is the monkey-human hybrids that are apparently coming soon. If no one puts a stop to that, hopefully we can. In other news, the Biden administration lifts restrictions on abortion pills to be mailed to anyone who wants them, apparently, despite the risks, and allows them to be delivered by mail. Under a policy set forth by the Biden, I'm sorry, said that wrong. Under a policy set forth by the Trump administration, the previous administration, the pills could not be dispensed by mail even through this COVID pandemic, because the pills themselves, according to the FDA, were dangerous. However, the new acting FDA commissioner said, quote, "Sending drugs by mail will not increase risks for women and will protect those who want the drugs from COVID-19, end quote. So again, it's all in the service of safety. Now that we can be safe and mail things, then you're protecting women who want to get abortions. But of course, no mention there of protecting the babies that are being killed, which is a tragedy. And of course, abortion advocates are elated by this news, but those who are actually interested in life and not murdering babies are worried for the unborn and the mothers to be. I am old enough to remember this slogan that abortionists used to say, which was safe, legal, and rare. That's how they wanted abortions to be. Obviously, we're well beyond that. This old slogan was touted as a rare event, only in the most extreme of cases. However, now you can simply click a button online and the abortion pills are mailed to you. That is obviously the direct opposite of rare. It's available anytime. And apparently, I don't know all of the details on how you do that as far as getting a doctor and whatever, but it's not rare, and that is my point here. But even then, I don't believe rare is a good argument. I don't think rare is an argument at all, and you're splitting hairs for essentially like good and evil. Rare is not a good argument. The argument to abortion should be never, ultimately. And again, when we talk about compassion, that sounds uncompassionate, and I don't mean to be uncompassionate. I don't mean to sound that way, because I am for the person that's struggling with this, for the person that has had an abortion. I have a lot of compassion, because that's a really sad circumstance, and we all have to deal with the circumstances of the life that we have and of the choices that we've made in the past. But as we move forward and we look at this, and as a general principle for society, a general principle for a moral society, we have to come to the conclusion that abortion should be never. In what case does killing a helpless human benefit society? In what case could it possibly benefit society? even in the quote rare case where a mother's life is at risk, this is not an abortion procedure. This is a medical procedure where you're having to prioritize medically who can survive certain procedures. So that's not an abortion question. The abortion question is, I don't want to have this baby. And almost every other case, every case that I can honestly think of, the choice is about convenience. Again, back to the choice of self. It's about what's good for me, not good for someone else, especially not good for a baby. I can't see it in another circumstance. And it's unfortunate that we've made it so prevalent that we, without blinking, just think that it should be a choice. Of course, this mail order pill has terrible side effects as well. And just on the case of, is it good for the mothers to be? And the pill apparently has terrible side effects, and numerous women have actually died from it over the last several years. According to the FDA, the Federal Drug Administration, many mothers to be have died from this pill. And that's a problem. But what I want to look at through this is the Los Angeles Times. Because again, when they tell you their perspective, you should listen and believe them. So the LA Times last week talked about the abortion issue, and not specifically this mail order issue, but actually they were responding to an issue in Ohio that we'll get to in a moment. But the LA Times admits this safe, legal, and rare was apparently just a smokescreen for, quote, according to the LA Times, and I believe this was the headline, the right to abortion means the right to have it for any reason. So there it is. I mean, again, that is the perspective. It was never about safe, legal, and rare. That was just a way to crack the door and get you to forget that in all circumstances, it is not a good thing. It's not a good thing to kill helpless humans. It's just not. There's no circumstance where that's okay. And add to that, it should be for any reason and or whatever reason, they say, and they expect for you to pay for it through your taxes. And that's really ultimately what we're talking about here. I tend to be more libertarian on issues where I don't care what you do with yourself. I really don't. If you want to make choices, I don't care what choices you make. But on literal issues of life and death, of which this is a literal issue of life and death, and that's not hyperbole, this is literally the life and death of a human, I can only be biblical. I can only follow the mandate of the Bible. I can only follow the guidelines of the Bible. I can only follow Jesus, who puts life, human life, as the highest value, just under worshiping God. We're to worship God and serve him and love him, and we're to love one another. In no universe can I imagine that killing a human is loving one another. And I don't know what to say. You shall not kill is a pretty low bar for me. You shall not kill. You shall not murder. Like that's pretty low. And I'd add, don't force me to pay for your murder seems like a pretty clear and non-controversial statement. And the fact that it's controversial is just unintelligible for me. I can't understand how we got to a place where everyone just accepts that this is okay. And again, I'm not talking about personal feelings about how this has affected your life. And I know this can be a very difficult situation, and circumstances can weigh heavily on your soul. I do understand that. I am not without compassion, but the reframing of this issue as reproductive choice or reproductive health or women's health, it's just a lie. It's not a choice to allow a baby to live or die. That's not a choice. It's not health to kill a baby. That is literally the polar opposite of health, is to kill. And it cannot be women's health to kill all the babies that will one day be women. At least 50% of the time, that's not women's health, because you've killed the women the babies that were going to be women. These lies that sound good and they sound like the truth are so dangerous, and we just have to watch out for them, and we have to understand the nuance and the honest tricks that are trying to persuade us into thinking these are different issues than they are. The fight from the LA Times is response to an Ohio case. And this is an Ohio law that has been in the courts for several years and did not allow a mother to choose an abortion just because a fetus may have Down syndrome. And that is a law that's on the books, and it was back and forth in the courts, and it continues to go back and forth. And the court made a decision last week that upholding the law that a woman may not choose to abort a fetus just because it seems to have Down's syndrome. That actually seems like a win to me. That's a great legal win, because a human is a human regardless of their condition. And again, to think otherwise is prioritizing certain people over other people, and we should not do that. That is not biblical. When God says love one another, he doesn't say love those people a little more than those people. Hopefully that rings to you and you understand, yeah, that's ridiculous. We should love people, period, full stop. That's it. If they have certain affects, I mean, we all have issues. And you can't selectively murder them in the womb because you don't like the way they're going to come out. Again, that I don't understand how this is controversial. Like, this should be very clear. But again, the LA Times, and this is not fringe. This is not some weird organization in the middle of nowhere saying these things. This is the LA Times. You cannot get more mainstream than the LA Times saying abortion should be for any reason, and any impedance to that abortion is a threat to a mother's right. This is what they are saying. And so you have to listen to their argument. This is their argument. And what you should hear as a believer is an impedance to abortion. Again, for any reason not allowing an abortion. That's the threat to their whole argument. This is what you should hear, and this is what you should understand, and this is why I wanted to talk about this. And I know it's a sensitive issue, and you can be mad at me for talking about this issue. That's fine, but I can't be silent on this. It's so important to protect those that cannot protect themselves. That is literally a mandate in Scripture, that we have to take care of the widows and the orphans. We have to take care of those that cannot take care of themselves. That is our actual job as believers. These babies cannot take care of themselves, and someone needs to speak for them. Someone needs to say, stop killing them just because you don't want to have them in the world, because it's inconvenient to have them in the world, because you don't like looking at them. Those are bad reasons to go through with this. So the argument from the Times is that abortion should be any reason, and any impedance or any stop to any kind of abortion is a threat to a mother's right. But what you should hear as a believer is that any threat to an abortion is a threat to their whole argument. Their argument is exactly, as always, backwards. The argument, they take the argument, they turn it upside down, and then somehow convince you to think, oh yeah, that sounds good. What they've said is any block to any kind of abortion is a threat to any woman's rights. That's exactly backwards. The real argument they have is, if any part of any abortion is wrong, then all of the abortions are wrong. That is their whole argument, and their argument falls apart. It points to something more sinister, and we really need to understand this, because again, it's tried to hide in nuance of small little adjustments, and then by the time all of the adjustments are out there, we go, oh, well, that's just normal. And again, it's a right. It's not a right to kill other people. It is not, and never will be, a natural law right, or a human law right, or at the foundation, a biblical right to kill other humans that don't deserve it, and have done nothing wrong, and are not liable. This is the problem, and this is the argument they have in America and around the world, that a person, for instance, according to this article in the LA Times, a person with Down syndrome is not allowed to live. They literally are prioritizing certain people over other people, and saying that some people cannot live. How can anyone take this and not be enraged by this? How can anybody not be enraged that they're saying certain people do not deserve to live? I don't know, and I'm enraged by it. It's unbelievable, and this is their motive. Their motive is, if you stop me for any reason on having full abortions anytime, for any reason or for no reason, then that's terrible. It's a terrible affront to women's rights, as they said. And I say the opposite. I say, if any abortion happens for any reason, that's an affront to humanity, period. Like, again, those that cannot defend themselves need defense from those that can. It gives me chills that these evil people are advocating for the killing of babies by the millions, and certain people are not allowed to live. And we need to be able to sift through this very, very crafty rhetoric that sounds good, but is in effect a lie to hide the terrible truth. Evil thoughts like this are just incomprehensible to me, and this should give you chills too. This is not fringe. This is not safe, legal, and rare, as they once said. This is mainstream, prioritizing certain lives over others and killing those that don't measure up. You need to be aware, and you need to do whatever you can to help. And I don't know what that is in your sphere, in your world, but even just talking about it and coming up with your own ideas about it is really important. That's why I do this here. In other less than human news, and I just wanted to end with this, the Uyghur Muslims in China, in the Xinjiang province of China, which you may or may not have heard about, but they have been making news because it's just this terrible persecution that the Chinese are doing towards this population. And it came out that a gynecologist exiled from China said there have been up to 80 sterilizations of these poor people per day because China really wanted to cut down on this particular demographic. I mean, it was very targeted towards this people group, that they did not want this people group growing. And like how terrible you're prioritizing a certain people group over another people group. And I realize China is a different country from America, but this is still terrible. And I had a bunch of stats written down. I'm not going to read them right now because we're running out of time, but just suffice to say that I think it's something that you need to know about, and you need to know that there are nations that are still perpetrating these terrible atrocities on other humans, regardless of race or religion. This is just not good, and it should not be so. And we really need to focus on how we can help. Again, one of the great things that I have loved until recently about America is that we allowed humans to be humans. It doesn't matter your race. It doesn't matter your religion. You have the freedom. You have the opportunity to prosper. And that has been taken away, again, through some of these weird abortion arguments. And again, I know this is not in America. This is a story from China, but there's a lot of connection that America has to China right now. And you may be sitting there thinking there's nothing you can do, but there are things you can do. There are things you can do, and some of them are big things and some of them are small things. But even some of the small things are, you can figure out how you are supporting China, whether it's by what you purchase or what you use. And are there ways you can use less of things from there? Your dollars do make a difference. And if we all used those dollars in a different way, maybe we could affect some other change, because that does make a difference. And I did want to end with, at least some are working on this. Secretary of State Blinken in March announced sanctions against Chinese officials responsible for oppression and violence towards the Uyghurs. He said, quote, in response to serious human rights abuse against members of ethnic and religious minority groups in Xinjiang. And that's good, and I'm glad about that. But I know we're in a broken world and it feels overwhelming at times, but I feel like you need to know these things. You need to know what's going on in America. You need to know what's going on in the world. You need to know the bad things that are taking place and things that you can do about it, because that sounds like a PSA, but the more you know really makes a difference. We can no longer be a generation, or we can no longer be a people who follow God, who bury our heads in the sand and pretend like none of this is going on. We have to not only know what's going on, but we have to be willing to act when that time comes. And you don't know when that time is going to come, but the more that you know about it, the more prepared you'll be when that decision comes, and you'll be able to be educated and be informed and be ready to make a choice, make a decision, do some action that might help and even change the world. And that is not an overstatement. Things that you do could make a difference in people's lives, in your community and beyond. And I think this is important, and I think you can continue to help wherever you are. So I pray God's blessing upon you, and I pray that, as always, you will keep the faith.